Today we're going to be discussing some of our management factors so we can better care for our livestock during the winter months. Here we are in the middle of January and we've had some cold snaps throughout Kansas and the Midwest. Here, of course, it's a little bit nicer day. We've had fluctuations in temperature. So we're going to kick things off and discuss a little bit on how we can increase our cattle comfort in some of our dirt floored feeding facility. Number one, bedding. The floor, the ground, it's frozen, it's cold. When we apply some dry bedding such as wheat straw, we can actually increase a thermal layer that we can increase the cattle comfort. They can lay down, they can rest during their rumination periods after they eat. The other thing to consider is the pen floor itself. Mud will turn into ice and will become very hard and rigid. Having a box scraper on hand is pivotal to be able to cut off those really sharp edges so these cattle can freely move within the pens to go to feed and go to water. And if we do get a big snowstorm, keep in mind, shoveling out and keeping our bunks as clean as possible before we put fresh feed is really important to increase cattle comfort and consumption during some of these hard weather conditions.
I'd like to focus on our cow-calf producers, both whether you're a spring or a fall calving operation that already has calves on the ground and will be weaning this spring. Very common across the U.S. and certainly here in Kansas that those cows are kept out in more range type conditions versus being brought in to specific corrals or up in a farmstead. So we need to make sure that we are providing adequate protection for those cows and newborn calves, especially that are starting to be born here in January, from the elements that we've been through. Over the last few weeks, we've went through many fluctuations and extended cold periods with snow and blowing snow. We need to offer those cattle some protection from having some windbreaks, some portable windbreaks that either are made on farm or commercially purchased. As well as when we talk about the feeding, we want to make sure we're feeding those cattle in a place for the majority of the time that isn't in the low-lying areas that are more susceptible to turn to heavy mud once, like on days like today, it actually starts to thaw. So those cattle and those calves that come down have a drier environment when we spread that feed out in different areas. One of the other concerns is if we feed in a low-lying area continually, oftentimes our water source is in that same area. And then we can create unsanitary conditions in terms of that surface water that they may be drinking from, or just the general extra activity which relates to more manure accumulation, and those baby calves are going to follow those cows and be in those low-lying areas. And then we can start to get into health challenges such as scours and other diseases that those calves may pick up from being in a low, muddy area that also has a higher concentration of manure itself.